If you have time to visit one and only one place in Arizona, it has to be this one. Did you guess the Grand Canyon? Of course it's the Grand Canyon.
I am shocked. Shocked! Well, not that shocked.
But this is AZ Unveiled, and I can't just let you have nice things, so I'm going to make your Grand Canyon trip creepy and weird.
Why can't I have nice things?
Because that's what I do. Hello, and welcome to AZ Unveiled. I'm Emily, your resident obsessive researcher and 4th gen Arizonan and all-around spooky enthusiast. I'm on a quest to unveil all of Arizona's dark, spooky, and sometimes straight-up weird history. And I'm bringing you along with me. So let's go. Obviously, the Grand Canyon is Arizona's claim to fame. It is the only one of the 7 natural wonders of the world that is in the United States. People come from all over the world to see it.
Neat!
So if you have just one day to spend in Arizona, I'm gonna make sure you get your Insta-worthy shots, but also have some eyebrow-raising tales to take back to your friends. Because what kind of spooky bestie would I be if I didn't? Before I get into these stories today, I do want to issue a warning that a number of them include the topic of suicide. If you'd like to avoid those particular stories, please feel free to jump ahead to the last story. Let's start with haunted hikes. First is the Grand Canyon Lodge and the Transit Trail. It is located just off of the North Rim Visitor Center and is home to Arizona's very own Wailing Woman. As the legend goes, sometime between 1928, when the original Grand Canyon Lodge was built, and 1932, when it burned to the ground, a young woman was staying at the lodge and she was waiting there while her husband and son went out for a hike along the Transit Trail. A sudden turn in the weather took their hike from peaceful to absolutely treacherous. Upon their return journey, they lost their footing and plummeted to their death. When they did not return, the woman became worried and went out to find them. But she soon learned of their fate. In her grief, she ran back to the lodge and took her own life. Since then, hikers and lodge employees have reported seeing a woman in a white dress with blue flowers out along the trail, as well as back in the lodge. In fact, there is one particular door in the lodge that the Wailing Woman cannot stand to be left open. It is said that if she encounters this door open, she will slam it shut. It has also been said that you can still hear her wails as she cries out for her child and husband. While we're near the North Rim, let's take a look at another haunted hiking trail. This time, the North Kaibab Trail. Just north of Colorado River and just to the west of Blackbridge, you will come upon a pile of stones marking the grave of Reese Griffiths. Griffiths was the foreman of the blasting crew that was working on clearing out the trail, but on February 6, 1922, there was a tragic accident. A boulder knocked loose by the blast came barreling down the mountainside, striking Griffiths and eventually killing him. Chief Ranger Charles Smith and his team had planned on carrying Griffith's body out of the canyon by mule, but decided it would be most suitable to lay him to rest in the canyon that he loved so much. Visitors have since sworn they saw his ghost still walking the trails. Others have said they witnessed a small light hovering above his grave. Now, Maricopa Point is another location that comes up often when discussing ghostly tales. You can find Maricopa Point just 2 miles north of Grand Canyon Village. Visitors to the area attest to seeing a shadowy figure or sometimes a dark mist that lingers around the handrail of the viewing point. The legend goes that sometime in the 1930s, a man who was part of the Civil Corps was installing those very railings when he tragically fell to his death. However, there are no reports of the incident nor newspaper articles, so we will probably never know if it's true. That being said, we do know of several others who have fallen off at Maricopa Point. According to the book Over the Edge: Death in the Grand Canyon, a number of people have chosen to end their life by leaping from this very spot. So it is possible that any one of those people could be responsible for the shadowy figure. We'll continue our journey along to Rim Trail on the south rim of the Grand Canyon now, just off of Grand Canyon Village. This area has a rather particular and unusual type of haunting. The next few stories come from the book Ghosts of the Grand Canyon by Judy and Brian James Martinez. The first tale is of a young woman named Tara. Tara had just been hired on to work the front desk of the Bright Angel Lodge, and she would be living on site at the Grand Canyon. Even more exciting, Tara had just gotten engaged, and soon her fiance would be joining her in working at the park. everything was going just peachy. That said, Tara was in high spirits as one afternoon she walked over to El Tovar Hotel to mail a letter to her fiance. Even better, no other people were out, so she could wander over to Rim Trail to catch the sunset. Arizona is known for its sunsets after all, especially at the Grand Canyon. But as Tara walked along the trail, she was suddenly hit with a sense of overwhelming depression. This made no sense. She was feeling elated just moments before. As she walked along further, she distinctly heard a woman's voice whisper in her ear, "Go to the rim and jump." Tara whipped around to see who would say such a thing, but of course, no one was there. So, as many people would do, Tara convinced herself that she must just be hearing things and continued on her way. But as she neared the cliff of the canyon, she once again heard a woman's voice, but more forceful this time, yelling at her to jump. Once she was able to free herself from being frozen with fear, Tara took off. Eventually, Tara got up the courage to ask another coworker if she had ever experienced anything unusual in the area, and to Tara's surprise, she had. Tara's co-worker Lisa recounted her own tale walking along Bright Angel Trail, which branches off from Rim Trail. So one day, Lisa and her friend were walking along the trail when she too heard a woman telling her to go to the rim and jump. Lisa's friend never heard anything. They continued walking, but once again she heard the woman's voice, angrier this time, telling her to go to the rim and jump. This is when Lisa was hit with the same overwhelming sadness that Tara had experienced. She even felt the urge to jump. Lisa's friend convinced Lisa to leave the trail, and eventually her dark feelings faded. After Tara and Lisa had exchanged their stories, a third employee, Laura, spoke up about her own encounter with this entity. She had fared even worse than the others. Laura had encountered the same female voice, but she had been behind Bright Angel Lodge at the time. Mincing no words, the voice told Laura to kill herself and that her life was pointless. As in Lisa's case, the friend who had been with Laura at the time never heard the voice. And as in both Lisa and Tara's stories, Laura too very suddenly became consumed by a wave of depression. But unlike Lisa and Tara, Laura's experience did not end there. Without warning, an unseen entity forcefully shoved Laura onto her back toward the rim. Laura attempted to get up and run away, but she was pushed again, even more violently, toward the edge of a 250-foot cliff. Now completely terrified, Laura made a break for it. She ran as fast as she could and never looked back. There are even more ghost stories about this particular area in the book Ghosts of the Grand Canyon, so I highly recommend reading it. Moving on to my final tale of the day. This last story is a tragic one. Maybe even more so than the others, simply due to the sheer number of lives lost. The morning of June 30th, 1956 started out just like any other. Both Captain Jack S. Gandy and Captain Robert S. Shirley were waiting at their respective terminals for clearance to take off from Los Angeles International Airport. Both flights were delayed, one for maintenance and one for holiday traffic. But by 9:04 a.m., both flights had departed. Captain Gandy, piloting for Trans World Airlines, was headed to Kansas City, Missouri, while Captain Shirley was en route to Chicago on United Airlines. The TWA flight took off heading north at an altitude of 19,000 feet, while the United flight headed east at an altitude of 21,000 feet. This may sound like the beginning of a terrible high school algebra problem, but I'm afraid the result is much worse than a failing grade. Due to some impending thunderstorms, the sky was cloudy and vision was limited. This meant that Captain Gandy was flying by instrument flight rules, or IFR, meaning he had to rely on instrument readings and communication with air traffic control to navigate. At 9:21, Captain Gandy on the TWA flight ran into some turbulence from the aforementioned storms. So he radioed air traffic control, requesting to increase his altitude to 21,000 feet. They denied his request because that would put him in the same airspace as the United flight. So instead, Gandy requested 1,000 on top, meaning 1,000 feet above the adverse weather conditions. Being above the storm would obviously restore his ability to see where he was going, thus allowing him to fly with VFR, or visual flight rules. Flying under VFR meant it was no longer the air traffic controller's responsibility to maintain separation between the two airplanes. That was now on the pilots. At 9:58 a.m., the United flight reported its location to the Civil Aeronautics Administration as flying over Needles, California at an altitude of 21,000 feet, expecting to reach the Painted Desert checkpoint at 10:31 a.m. At 9:59 a.m., the TW-8 flight reported its location to the company radio station in Las Vegas, stating that they had just passed Lake Mojave at an altitude of 21,000 feet, and they were on course to reach the Painted Desert checkpoint at 10:31 a.m. The Salt Lake controller had both of these reports and knew the two planes would be converging on the exact same airspace at the exact same time, and yet he did not relay the information to either pilot. And according to the Civil Aeronautics Board's accident investigation report, because both planes were flying under visual flight rules in uncontrolled airspace, it was not the controller's responsibility to do so.
Not my problem.
At 10:31 a.m., the aeronautical radio communication picked up the very last transmission from either plane. At the time, it was too noisy to make out. Later analysis would reveal the message, "Salt Lake, United 718, we're going in," along with another person frantically yelling to pull up. And then all communication with both planes was lost. At 11:51 a.m., the Air Traffic Control Center issued a missing aircraft alert. It was another pilot who first spotted something. He flew a small plane giving tours over the Grand Canyon, and on that day, he spotted smoke coming from within the canyon, and upon a second look, he saw the wreckage. It was confirmed the next morning. The two planes had collided in mid-air. The TW-8 flight plummeted down, crashing into Temple Butte. The United pilot tried to pull up and save the aircraft, but it was too late. The plane smashed into the side of Shwar Butte. All 128 people on board both planes, including passengers and crew, were killed, making this one of the deadliest commercial aviation crashes in U.S. history. This incident directly led to the formation of the Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA, to create stricter and safer regulations for airplane travel. Of the 128 people killed in the crash, less than half of their bodies were ever recovered. Even fewer were identified. Those that could not be identified were buried in a mass grave in Grand Canyon Pioneer Cemetery, and memorials were made to honor their memory. With so many lives lost, it's no wonder that the location gained a reputation for being haunted. Some visitors have reported seeing floating lights around the area, but there is another story that is particularly interesting. In the book Haunted Hikes by Andrea Langford, Park Ranger KJ Glover details the events of one particular night when she was camping in the canyon between Shwar and Temple Butte. She recalls that she was surprised to hear voices coming from outside her tent, and she was even more shocked when she looked out to see more than a dozen people walking along the trail. Odder still, these people were dressed in business attire, certainly not something you would wear to hike to the bottom of the Grand Canyon. She also noted that there were 5 or 6 Native Americans following along with the group. Glover decided to go out and investigate, but by the time she had gotten out of her tent, all of the people had disappeared. Could these people that Ranger Glover saw have been the victims of the tragic plane crash in 1956? What do you think? If you're astute, you probably noticed that I missed some pretty prominent haunted places in the Grand Canyon, like El Tovar Hotel and pretty much all of the other lodges. And initially, I had planned on covering those places in this episode, but frankly,
It just got way out of hand!
it was just too much for one episode. So I will cover those in a future episode. Probably the next one, but don't hold me to it, just in case.
No promises.
Thank you so much for watching. If you have any particular ghost stories or haunted places that you want me to cover, be sure to let me know in the comments. And if you would be so kind, please hit that like and subscribe button so you can continue to get all of the future spooky Arizona stories. As always, I'm Emily, and this is AZ Unveiled. See you next time.